That's the area that I worry about that keeps me up at night is really the third party risk management because it was not designed for the Gen AI era. And now we really need to revamp it. Otherwise, we're going to get in big trouble.
That's Cindy too, Director of IT and Data Audit. Cindy has a long career as an auditor in finance, and she has a unique vantage point on the industry's evolution of risk management and data governance. A vantage point that has evolved alongside finding her voice on the main stage. She joined me to discuss the misunderstood world of governance and the importance of standing up and speaking your mind. I'm Thomas Bean, and this is Data Science Leaders. In her early days of finance audit, Cindy saw her primary role as focused on data integrity concerns under an IT risk framework. And though governance was often seen as something of a negative word, Cindy was quick to remind me
I mean, governance is still a negative word nowadays because when people talk about governance, right, they are thinking, oh no, these are the guys who are going to slow us down, right? These are the no guys.
but Cindy doesn't think that's actually the case. Instead, she sees governance as an undervalued asset.
How do I say it? Like maybe innovate more responsibly, right? Not the no guys. Like, how can we turn that no into an yes or maybe?
Now, that take might seem like an unpopular opinion, but Cindy isn't shy about sharing her opinions. At least, not anymore.
So I was born in China, right? I grew up in China and then I started working here, right? Obviously got an LA like degree and then working here. But I think that Asian culture, the upbringing is still very rooted like in my DNA, right? So I mean mom absolutely you're right. Like she has a strong character, right? She had worked in her entire life in China. She had very specific philosophy about working is that I'll tell you the Mandarin, what it sounds like, right? She will say 少说多做. And that translates into don't speak up, just work hard, right? So that is, everyone is um informed by their life experience. And that's what her life experience telling her is that just work hard. Don't draw attention to yourself, right? That's how she lived her life and worked her entire career, right? But that's not, as I'm finding out, like in the past 2 decades I work, right? Like that's not how it works here, right? So it's very interesting kind of have the upbringing, but finding out how do you actually live in the American culture, right? The work experience here it was a big enough culture shock, to be honest.
As an expat who has lived in the United States for some time, I can tell you how big this American culture shock really is. And so the first half of Cindy's career was defined by her drive to succeed, by showing up, by listening, and learning. She's attending every conference she can get to, thinking all along.
The voices or the leaders who dominate these sessions, there's really not many people who look like me. I'm the first generation immigrant, right? English is not my native language. I never really, kind of like picture, oh, that could be me. That's how it was back in the days. I was just there attending the conference, listening to what they had to share.
So Cindy goes to countless conferences, and one day she hears a speaker that particularly resonates with her. She reaches out to say, "Hi, I really enjoyed your session." And the speaker,
She actually responded and invited me to speak at a local event. And I remember it was a local event for women in data. I was surprised. And after I thought it for a little bit, it's like, well, why not? It was very scary. But I thought to myself, well, why not? Let's just try it out, see how it goes. It was amazing how many people approached me after the session and a lot of them like made comments about that my story actually inspired them a lot, which is very surprising given that the very first session I did.
what did you realize about yourself? You were in a zone, your story made an impact, your speech made an impact. What did you realize about yourself?
So what I realized is that I really deep down enjoy the overall experience, right? Before, during, and after, right? It was not the fact that I shared my perspective is the fact that I was able to engage and connect with the audience.
And it looks like as you were going through this realization on stage, it also changed the way you saw your place in the audit and risk and AI governance conversation. So, can you tell us a bit more? Like, did it feel like shifting from reviewing the system to helping shaping it, or taking a more active role?
I think is not the fact that I'm like just a good speaker, right? I really have kind of like finding out I have a unique angle to share because as I have told you in the earlier conversation, right? Like I'm oftentimes one of the only auditors in the room, right? In these data conference, AI conference, right? And that means I actually could see from a big picture view because of my unique background the intersection between IT, cyber, data, and AI risk. Because as you know, that the AI risk is very much a top level enterprise level risk. It's not just related to IT data or third party or model, right? It's all everything, right? So it requires a lot of different stakeholders and parties to collaborate together to sit on the steering committee or whatever the organization that is providing the oversight for AI risk to be able to ensure that you are consider all the aspect of the AI risk. So it started this whole journey about making sure that I can actually engage with the right leader at the enterprise, especially like financial services. It's like surprisingly a small world. Everyone kind of know everyone, right? Data leaders, AI leaders, like, audit leaders and risk professionals. So we're actually a very tight knit community, right? We all share perspective about what works, what doesn't. And then through that sharing, you kind of understand the leaders at the personal level and build a connection that lasts lifetime as well.
But at this same time, you took a way more active role in kind of shaping the AI governance frameworks of the financial institutions you were working at. So, when did that switch happen in terms of I'm just not evaluating, I'm now influencing? You spoke about the audience and your speaking activities, but in the context of the organization you were working at, how did this shift happen in terms of, hey, I'm taking the wheel, and now we're going to drive and define because I have this unique perspective.
That also happened like slowly and gradually, right? So, because of my role, and there's not really a lot of the risk professions and audit profession that has that, like big picture view across different risk stripe, right? And at the time was like IT, cyber, data, and AI, right? So, which is why we were invited in and sits on the GenAI Council. That's our honestly our first iteration of GenAI like governance framework, right? And how it came about is really like through our engagement and, the effective challenge that we were performing at the time with all the GenAI cases that we were funding through from, you know, inception, honestly, to proof of concept, to wider rollout and implementation. And because of our input, and we were able to shape the second iteration of the GenAI, like governance framework, right? Defining what is acceptable AI use cases and defining what the risk assessment should be involved and defining what level the approval that would need based on the GenAI cases, the classification piece, right? Through the triaging process, deciding which path it should take and what management level committee's approval would be required before it can go to proof of concept, before it can go to general or wider rollout and implementation. All of that is really through the gradual effort and that you became that opinion leader, became that influencer, and you get invited to the sit at the table and you have a voice at the table, and that then you become more from a participant standpoint to more of an influencer and stakeholder at that point. So it also happened slowly and gradually, just like a trust. It doesn't build overnight. It's through the gradual influencing and connection and relationship building.
I love what you just mentioned about trust. Can you give us an example of the type of problem of risk that only your unique perspective could highlight? Because that's also part of this moment.
What I was able to bring to the table is because I have extensive background in IT, cyber, and data and AI. And Also, because I have experience designing and implementing IT and data audit framework at various like financial institution. I'm also specializing data governance. So I understand that like through implementation of a governance framework is not just like technology and process, is also people, right? So with any change management, is people, technology, and process. And oftentimes the most important part and the most difficult part, guess what? Is people. Right? Because it involves more of a culture shift. It involves oftentimes organization changes as well. So, which is why it's hard, right? Like our human nature, the first instinct is to get comfort to routine and resist change, right? So it requires a lot of people, a lot of effort, a lot of influencing, right? So my perspective is that I have experience implementing the framework and know how hard it is and know and understand it's not an overnight effort. It requires a lot of people, a lot of buy-ins, a lot of influencing, right? It's not just the technology has to be right, the process has to be right, but the people has to buy in on it. And that's number one. And the number two part is that because I have experience in all these different risk, right? I understand that if there's a specific risk that we're considering about GenAI cases, if they are multiple control breakdowns related to the same area, that risk tend to be also compounding, right? Which increase the likelihood of a specific attack or specific thing that could go wrong to happen with a much higher likelihood because of two control breakdown in the same area. And because the fact that we oftentimes do a lot of like trend analysis and root cause analysis on a lot of issues that we see across the board, not a single like lines of business, but across the board, looking at the quarter over quarter trend in terms of the issue in a specific area, we understand, right? If you get a collection of five different issues, it talks about not just a single control breakdown, because especially if it's across different lines of business, that's telling us that maybe we didn't fix the right root cause in the first place. And it's a widespread breakdown in this very specific control in the same area, then it tells us maybe the root cause is in governance, is in training, is in guidance, right? So there's a lot of these like big picture view that the audit have the luxury of seeing from 3,000 feet above the sky, right? Not just looking at one issue in isolation, but looking across the board. So that's why there's a lot of different things that we can offer to be having a seat at the table is because of these experience that I have had in this field specifically.
Yeah, the risk, just like the solutions you were talking about, are compounding themselves as well. And you're open
Yeah.
to a little bit of risk that might be acceptable, but you take it at the group level, then you might have something much, much more significant.
Yeah.
Um, you mentioned earlier governance is still being figured across the industry, but that was especially true as you were seeing Gen AI arrive and such. And um, what were you starting to see in these early conversations that others were not talking about?
So I definitely see, because I connect regularly with the chief AI officer, chief data officer, and CISO and CIO as well, right? I'm seeing that these AI governance framework is much more mature than before, and the rate of innovation now it's definitely speeding up. But on the flip side, I'm also seeing there's a lot of the stories that they share about what could go wrong or what went wrong already that is also actually pretty scary, right? So it's you are seeing on one hand, you are seeing the AI governance framework maturing. And the other side, you are seeing because of the fact that we are more on the risk management, we're finding out more about the risk exposure now that in turn is making us more cautious also when we are rolling out Gen AI use cases to do more risk assessment or have a way to feed the risk assessment, feed these Gen AI use cases back to the assessment process because as the Gen AI model is implementing, right, or implemented in the production for a while, the performance rate. if you're not being careful, if you don't have continuous monitoring in place, right? So that's the general trend. I do think the governance framework is maturing, but the risk, I think we're finding out more about the risk exposure now. And the other case I also want to see is on the horizon is that I'm seeing a lot of gap in the third party risk management framework right now because it was not obviously designed for the GenAI era that we're in now. So now I do see a lot of exposure on the third party space because one, third party, you have less control over what they do with your data. Even they say, well, your data is on-prem, right? Is not gonna get cross-trained, but how do you know, right? Until you can validate that, you can verify that. Especially those bigger players, we always had trouble validating these third parties environment anyway with a big player like AWS and etc. because they're too big for any single client, so they care about you, right? Any single client just not big enough for them. So they don't wanna open their book for your audit and all that. But then deep down, how do you know they're actually doing the right thing? They're actually doing what they say they were doing, right? So and as you see, there's a lot of GI model out there like ChatGPTs and Perplexity, Anthropics, right? They already all the public available datas, right? There's no more data for them to train. They're actually using AI to create data for their training. So what they're after next is your enterprise confidential and proprietary data. You have to safeguard it because that's what's giving you the competitive advantage, right? And also, you have to safeguard it to comply with relevant laws and regs, right? It's not a nice to have, it's a necessity, right? Especially for financial services company. So that's the area that I worry about that keeps me up at night is really the third party risk management because it was not designed for the Gen AI era and now we really need to revamp it. Otherwise, we're gonna get in big trouble.
In such a fast evolving domain, I mean, I know the regulations are moving slow, but the technology is moving super quickly, and the businesses, I mean, use cases are invented right in front of us. How do you, as a thought leader, but also as an executive, how do you stay current, or actually, how do you have a forward looking perspective in a domain that's evolving so quickly?
What I do regularly is I connect with the industry leader because you actually will be able to hear what's happening on the ground because what's reported on the news is not what's happening on the reality on the floor, right? So you want to actually see behind the scenes story about, hey, oh, this banking company have rolled out AI agent. Was it actually AI agent? Was it simply just automation, right? So you are through your connection with these industry leader are able to see what's truly happening behind the scenes and what works, what doesn't, and what they have tried out with the generic cases and what could go wrong, right? Actually that's the most valuable thing that I gained from being the industry leader is the ability to connect with people at different level and hear their story and share what works and more importantly because these are not just hey you want to hear some funny story to tell you actually bring it back to your daily work to say hey because I heard this story. What should we do to better manage risk, right? When we are seeing these use cases so that we can get in front of it and we're not going to get into trouble with the regulator and we're not going to violate any laws and regs, right? Because we're doing this for a reason is to bring it back to apply to your work so that you can become a better professionals and you can actually look out for the company's best interests as well.
Um, we spoke about how you came to become a speaker, how also the early days of AI and Gen AI governance. Let's speak about today. You spoke a lot about the people as being a big part of the solution. So, what has changed in terms of how AI is governed or how risk is assessed for AI in enterprises today? What have you seen?
I do see there's a lot of different flavors of AI governance framework out there, and that is for a reason because if you think about the AI, like let's say even chief AI officer or CDO organization, right? Like organizationally, every company they sits at different part of the business. Some of them are report to CFO, some are report to CIO, some report to CEO, right? So, and that is due to the organization culture, their maturity, their level of like scrutiny from a regulation perspective, also like the their lines of business, what kind of product they're selling, right? What agency will be governing them. And like all the factor matters, right? So you are seeing a lot of different flavors of AI governance framework out there. That's for a reason. And I see a big potential in the AI governance framework field is because it's not a one size fits all solution. Even if, let's say, we announced in 2026 there's a golden standard out there for AI governance framework, the company is not going to be able to adopt it right away. And the reason being that it change management is just different story every company, right? And the governance framework, how it works, is it centralized model? Is it decentralized model? Who have a say in there? What kind of level approval, risk assessment is needed? Every company, their risk appetite framework is also very, very different. What is acceptable risk for company A may not be acceptable risk for company B. And there's a reason for that, right? So even if there's a standard, let's say today, right, January 2026, we have a gold standard, the company is not going to be able to adopt it because you have to figure out what does that look like for your company. So I'm seeing a lot of different flavor out there, which is okay because every company have a different answer when it comes to what is the right balance between innovation and risk management. And that is creating a lot of opportunity for risk professions like me, right? If you think about audit, like the risk management skills is very transferable for first and second line as well, is that you are able to translate that risk requirement, what is acceptable risk, into a framework that is designing for that company specifically. So yeah, I'm seeing a lot of different flavor out there, but they're all maturing into more a rigor, a framework, a structure, which is very, very good trend for the overall industry. We're all trying to figure it out, and we're trying to figure it out using that experimentation because no one have the right answer. So we have to do more of a test and learn so that as an industry we can figure out what are the all the risk exposure out there, what could go wrong, how can we safeguard it. And through these exchange of the insight, right, sharing with the industry leader, we're going to be able to get to the final answer of what is the minimum level of the rigor that should look like, right? We can come up with what the minimal standard is, but to figure out what the individual AI governance framework, it requires your company to have the risk profession tailor that and design it for you. So that's what I'm seeing in the industry out there.
Do you think we'll ever have a gold standard, or do we even need a gold standard? Because I'm listening to you and I'm thinking actually a gold standard might be a good step forward for the companies that may be a little bit behind, but for the ones that are pushing ahead, it might be actually holding them back. So
Right.
there's a tension there.
Yeah. So I think there will be like a baseline requirement. Let's say maybe NIST will like release something that is for financial services industry specifically, right? So if you think about the category 1 banks, they're already far ahead probably, right? So but for the mid-sized bank, like maybe there's a few areas that you still need to patch up, right? That's the baseline requirement that you have to be compliance with. And then there's a different level of rigor that comes if you're category 1, category 2, category 3 bank, right? So I do think there will be an industry baseline that will be released. But, to your point, if you're far ahead, maybe you need to do more because the risk is much more, the volume of transaction that's going through is much more, the level of data that you have for the customer is much more. So you are holding a very different bar. And that's what it is doing. And that's their job, right? To make sure that these are tailored in a different way so that they are different bars that they have to meet.
You were just talking about the importance of figuring it out together as an industry. So, what does that community look like to you today, from your vantage point, and what kind of collaboration that maybe could not happen without the community are happening now?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and there's a lot of community, like, I attended, like, for example, EDM Council and ABA, right? American Bankers Association. So they all have like data governance working groups and AI governance working groups, right? And as a matter of fact, EDM Council is working on the next iteration or already released the next iteration of the CDMC framework that included the AI capability in there as well, right? So these wouldn't happen without industry professions coming together and sharing what should be, what is the bar for data risk management in the cloud environment, right? In this Gen AI era. So there's a lot of people who are trying to get to into the AI field because they're seeing this as a more of this exponentially exploding area right now, right? It's very hot. So there's a lot of different professions trying to get in, and in financial services particularly as well. But honestly, I see a stronger community coming together. There's a lot of people, there's a lot of player in there, but there's never a dull moment because people are sharing stories about what they work experience is and what their different flavor of AI governance framework is, so that we can say, hey, maybe we should try that, right? It's all about experimentation, it's all about sharing, and that's what's making this community stronger.
What's your perspective on the kind of tooling that could be provided to these governance or to these risk teams? And are agents going to help actually in that domain? What do you expect to happen on this front?
I think we have to have trust in the AI agent first before we can actually apply in the AI governance world. And the tooling itself, honestly, and that is also a question for yourself. What tool you have already? How easy is it to embed the new tooling into your overall ecosystem? And what kind of feature are you looking for that your current tool doesn't have? And that's also very individual answered as well. Yeah.
Where do you think we're headed with this notion of AI governance? And I say AI governance, I want to go back to the fact that you said it needs to be an all encompassing risk management. But um, where do you think we're headed? And what excites you? What's the next frontier? What is possible in that domain that will unlock even more value for financial institutions or any actually enterprise?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say generally I'm very excited for AI innovation, and I attended the NVIDIA conference, the GTC conference in DC just a few months back, right? What they have released about the Omniverse, virtual reality, how they are collaborating with different industry into creating, like, let's say with Johnson & Johnson, they're creating that virtual reality for surgical use, right? Especially they're able to simulate the surgery environment so that the doctor can actually simulate a surgery before they even perform on a real patient, right? That in itself excites me and scare me at the same time because one, right, think about the endless possibility what they could do, right, with the AI factory, with everything, with the weather simulations, with surgery, with everything, everyday life, right? They're gonna over all aspect of our life, right? Which is very, very exciting to me because the endless possibility that it brings. The other parts being risk profession that scares me is that how do you know it actually simulate the real world example, right? Because for the surgical use particularly, the consequences could be very dire, right? Could be life and death situation, right? It's not like, we're managing AI use cases. The stake is not that high, right? But when you are performing surgery on a real patient, the stake is very high. So deep down, I worry about like how can we validate it actually simulate the real reality with all the physical aspect and all the element of the environment. How do we continue to ensure it still simulate the real world experience, right? Is what scares me, but that also creates job security and opportunity for risk professionals. So I'm not complaining. But yeah, it's if you attended and hear Jensen Huang's keynote, like it's very, very exciting. The future could bring with AI agent, with AI factory, with endless possibilities AI could bring, but the risk management framework has to catch up as well.
Or evolve as fast as the innovation? That's
Yes,
I
yeah,
totally,
hope that.
to
That's what we're all working towards.
the way that Cindy found herself on stage is the way that all AI leaders need to be thinking of progress. Had she never believed that the spotlight was for her, we would be deprived of her unique and holistic approach to governance. This is especially true for those who see the stage but don't see themselves on it. The thing I particularly appreciated hearing was how every part of Cindy's story, on a personal and professional point, actually bring together this unique perspective that he uses to assess risks and identify value and enable value in enterprise AI. If you enjoyed this episode, please stop to leave us a rating, and if you have time, a review. You are the reason we produce this show. This is Data Science Leaders, where we learn from real experiences of those building and governing the intelligence systems shaping our world. A show by AI leaders for AI leaders. This show is brought to you by Domino Data Lab, trusted by the world's most advanced enterprises to operationalize AI responsibly and at scale. I'm Thomas Bean. Thanks for joining us.